Hey everyone, Dr. Nadia Rizzo here, naturopathic doctor, and thanks for joining me. I am so excited to be bringing you this live stream. Thank you for all those who are joining. If you are joining on live, make sure you say hi. I have a free gift for you for those of you who join us live. So make sure you introduce yourself, you say hi. If you're catching the replay, just hashtag replay in the comments, and we're going to send you something special too. So tonight we are so blessed to be joined by Dr. Jennifer Belus. So Dr. Jennifer Belus has her PhD in clinical psychology. She's a researcher and she specializes in couples therapy. And I invited Dr. Belus on here because one of the most common things that people report to me in my clinical practice as a source of their stress is interpersonal relationships. And obviously this makes sense. You know, we're human beings, we're not robots. We are made to be interacting with each other. So it's common that we're going to have some differences come up and that it is going to become stressful, and sometimes we don't always see eye to eye. But we really don't want to have this heavy burden of, the stress weighing us down with our loved ones. So Dr. Belus is going to be joining us tonight to be bringing us a very special tool that we can use to bust the stress in relationships. And the thing that I really love about this is that you don't have to just apply this to your romantic relationships. What she's going to be talking about with us tonight is actually something that we can apply to all of our relationships. Holidays are just around the corner. Maybe you're going to be having some family events. Maybe you're going to be seeing your in-laws. Maybe you're going to be seeing your own family. Maybe you have a situation at work with a boss, with a coworker. Maybe it's something with a friend. It's not the tool that Dr. Belus is going to be giving us tonight is not something that we just use with our romantic partners. It's also something that we can use with all of our relationships. So we're going to be bringing her on. I have her here. I have two screens going right now, and I have her on one. Dr. Belus, are you good? Are you good? Hi.
I am here. Hi, but I am not able to log on to Facebook Live right now. It's giving me an error message. So
when you log on to Facebook on your mobile
over the computer, I guess and it's not your video is not showing up for me. So
on my professional page, not on my personal.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh.
You have to go on the home of the professional page.
Hold on.
It's the technical bit that we always... It's okay. It'll give people a chance to also gather themselves and pop on.
And your professional page is?
Dr. Nadia Rizzo, ND.
Okay, let's just see.
I remember when I did my very first Facebook Live was March of this year, 2018, and I did it. Actually, I was in this hotel when I did it, and I did it with weight loss coach and naturopathic medical graduate Andrew Hanoun, and we did it on weight loss and basically like his protocol for weight loss and fat burning and those types of things and resetting the metabolism. And I remember when he came on camera. And I was like, I didn't know anything about going live and how you have to be on your phone. There's like all these things. You have to be on your mobile. You can't be on your laptop. You have to log on to the video for the person to invite you. Like there's all these little rules. And and so that's what me and Dr. Belus is doing right now. But I remember when Andrew came on, because it was my very first time ever doing like a video, and he logged on and I was like, hi. Like you would think I was in love with the guy, but I was just so happy not to be on camera by myself and to have him there. I can hear myself in there. Okay. Yay! Okay, so Dr. Belus is coming on. Bear with us. Hi, Marianne. You can see you here. Bear with us as it's connecting. So again, if you're on say hi. I have something special for all the live viewers in the comments. If you're catching the replay, hashtag replay, you'll get something as well. Hi, Dr. Belus.
Hi, sorry about that. Apologies, technical difficulties.
All good. So thank you for joining. So as I mentioned, Dr. Belus has her PhD in clinical psychology. She's a researcher and she specializes in couples therapy, and how blessed we are for her to be sharing her wisdom with all of us tonight about busting stress in relationships. So take it away, Dr. Belus.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Rizzo, for that introduction, and it's great to be here. I mean, I think as you were telling everyone, all the listeners, that communication is such a challenge, and it doesn't just apply to couple relationships, but also to any kind of dyad, right? Whether it's your boss, your coworker, family or friends, especially around the holidays. There's a lot of stress and anxiety, and there's a lot going on, so that often makes communication more challenging too. What I am going to share with you today is give you a little bit of an overview about some of the challenges that we see couples. So my background is primarily working with couples, but like Nadia said, these skills can be applied to working with any two people. So certainly don't feel like these are things you have to use with just your partner. But I do want to talk a little bit about why communication challenges are so pervasive, and then describe some patterns that we often see. And I want people to reflect on whether they've noticed some of these patterns in their own life. And then I want to go through the two key roles of communication, speaker and listener, and what are the tips that you can use to apply to.
And there's going to be one tool, sorry to cut you off, but she's going to be giving us, I already know, hush, hush. She's going to be giving us one amazing tool that you can use when you're interacting with someone to bust the stress in the communication thing. So that's going to be like the bread and butter. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to walk you through kind of what do those tips actually look like. But at the end of this, you're going to get a tip sheet. So you can have it in your back pocket, something to look at before you have a big conversation, to remind yourself, okay, what do I need to do again to actually be good at communication?
Okay.
So that's where we're going. But I just, before we jump in, or as we jump in, I just really want to normalize the fact that communication difficulties or communication challenges are so pervasive, and I think sometimes people feel very bad if they have communication challenges with their partner or other people. And it is one of the most common things we see when people come to couple therapy, is not able to communicate effectively. And it often doesn't start off that way. Usually at the beginning of a relationship, for example, couples might fight about one or two things, but over time, what you might notice is that some of the little things become bigger issues, right? And you might get distressed or upset over not so much about what the issue is, but it's more about the fact that the communication's not going well. The distress is about because we can't sit down and have a conversation, and that's why things feel so challenging. So I do just want to normalize that. If you're experiencing that, you're not the only one. But again, these tips will help you reflect on maybe where the challenge is and how to help it going forward.
Before you continue, I just want to remind the viewers, because I see more people hopping on. If you're hopping on live, make sure you say hi, because we have a free gift for you at the end. So make sure you say hi so we can tag you and get you your free gift. So sorry, please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to describe just some different types of problematic communication patterns that we see. And again, you can reflect on whether you've noticed these in your own relationships or whether you've seen them in other people's relationships as well. So one common pattern that's a real challenge is something called demand withdraw. And that's where one person, I'll describe them as partners, but again, they could be anybody, where one partner kind of demands discussion about things. They want change. They're kind of sort of pushy. They always want to have the conversation.
Oh, that was so me. Yeah. I was so the demander. Okay, so we need to talk about this right now. You can't sleep.
Yeah. Exactly, right? You can't say no, perhaps. And the person in this pattern on the other end is the withdrawer, right? So it's called demand withdraw. So as the demander puts more demands on the other person, the withdrawer, what do you think they're
like,
do?
See you later, lady. Yeah.
They withdraw, right? They avoid. They pull back. So the more the demand happens, the greater the withdrawing is on the other end. So it's kind of like the two people are working in opposite directions of each other. And, both parties, no one feels good in that interaction, right? The demander never has the conversation and the withdrawer feels overwhelmed. So it doesn't go well, but it's something we often see. The other one is something that we call mutually avoidant. So some couples will say, we never fight. It's great. So, if you're able to have conversations about important topics, but they don't lead to arguments, that's great. But if the reason you're not having fights is because you never talk about things that are important, that's a problem. So that's what
just to highlight, so mutually avoidant. So we had the mutually avoidant is things are fine, we never fight, but really they're not fighting because
Yeah.
they're just actually not even talking about anything. Yeah.
Exactly.
Not
Exactly.
good. Okay.
So you can imagine, you know, why that's a problem, because, you know, there are issues under the surface, but they're not being discussed. And so either important decisions aren't being made about important topics, or both parties have feelings about the situation, but they're not talking about it, but the feelings are bubbling under the surface, right? So things like resentment, you know, anger towards each other, frustration, all those things might be there, but they're not being discussed. So eventually you might have a blow up, you know, for example, but that's one of the problems with this kind of communication.
Okay.
And then the last one is something we call demand, or basically it's like a high conflict relationship, right? So both people are really kind of pushing to have the conversation or the discussion, but things feel like they get out of hand very quickly. So you can think about kind of maybe two fiery people in a relationship where things go from 0 to 60 really quick. And that's hard, right? Because usually neither person is really heard in the discussion, and both people, you know, there's a lot of talking, a lot of discussion, but it's not actually a conversation. So neither person gets heard, and therefore it's really hard to make decisions or to really understand what the other person's going.
So I have a question. So to highlight, so we had three things that Dr. Belus talked about. So one, we had the demand and withdraw. So one person is like, no, we need to talk about this right now. The other person is like, and they withdraw. Then we had the two, like, was it withdraw?
Yeah,
mutually avoidant. So that's like, oh, we never fight. So this is the second one. Oh, we never fight, but really it's that no, they're just not actually talking about important topics, then decisions aren't getting made. And then we have the third one where both people are fired up and they're like, demand, we gotta talk, and then no one's heard because everyone's so busy saying what they want to say. So those are three different kinds. So Dr. Belus, I have a question for you. I assume that there may be one that's more common within a relationship, but is it possible that a couple, and again, it doesn't have to be a romantic couple, but you know, that two people, let's just, it's easy to use the example of romance, right? So a romantic couple, let's say, a couple, if two partners, can they change between these three types of communication? So sometimes we're in a demand together, and then other times we're like a demand and one person's withdrawing. Is that possible? Do you see that in couples?
It is possible. I mean, couples usually fall into, you know, a communication pattern is usually pretty consistent for a couple, so they tend to fall in one. But, for example, there could be certain kinds of topics that couples really struggle to talk about. So they might, let's say, typically be a demand withdraw couple, but when it comes to, let's say, their sex life, they're both avoidant, you know, because it's so hard to talk about.
I see. So maybe if you're watching right now, stop and think. You probably already have it in your head because I had a few flashbacks myself. You know, ask yourself, like, what do I do? You know, am I the demand? Am I the withdrawal? Like, ask yourself, what are my patterns? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Okay. And you know, have that in mind when we talk about the different communication skills for the speaker and the listener, because you know, you might approach it differently if you tend to be a demander versus if you tend to be a withdrawer. So just kind of keep that in mind. So what I was hoping we could do now is talk about the different roles in the conversation. So there's two roles. You know, it shouldn't be a surprise. There's a speaker and a listener, but they're you know, surprise. But the role and the goal of each person is actually quite different. And actually, it should also, you know, be an important reminder that there's only one speaker at any time, right? It's a speaker and a listener. So if you're ever in a conversation, there's two people talking at the same time, it's not part of effective communication, right? And it's probably pretty obvious why, but you know, again, you can't listen and communicate at the same time, right? So you really need to pick a role for yourself and stick to it. And after, you know, and we're going to talk about what the different roles look like, but I guess the other thing to consider is, you know, it's great if couples, for example, again, you know, both work on these skills at the same time, but it's not always possible. And you're probably going to have listeners, you know, listening to this this video now or later who who they themselves want to change, but the other person doesn't want to, you know? And so
It's hard.
these are definitely skills.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard, you know, on the one hand, it is challenging because we know that communication is going to happen more effectively if both people, you know, can make the changes and adapt these healthier strategies. But if just one person does, it's better than nothing. You know, and so if you find yourself in a position where, you know, you want to say something and the other person wants to say something and that person doesn't really have great skills, but you do, you know, you can get into the listener role first, because the listener role is a powerful role too. We often think the speaker has all the power, they're the one communicating, and that's true, they have power, but so does the listener, right? And if you can make that person feel heard and understood, you actually do have a lot of power.
If I can just chime in here, because Dr. Belus and I, obviously we chatted about like what we wanted to bring forward here with this discussion with everyone, and that was something that we talked about. You know, imagine, what does that feel like when we can all, I'm sure, think about, we've all done it, I think, and we've all had it done to us, right? Like, we can't, you know, get off our high horses here. We've all done it, and we've all had it done to us, right?
Exactly.
So, like, what does that feel like when you're trying to effectively say something to someone and they are just not hearing you? Like, that feels really shitty, okay?
Right.
Like, I'm just gonna, that feels crappy, okay? And then when we're the person who someone is trying to tell us something and we don't let them get it out, I'm like, shit, did I just do that tonight? I'm just having a flashback to dinner. Did I just do that? And like, they're trying to tell us something, and then we're not letting them, or we're cutting them off, or we're just wanting to say what we want to say. Like, then they're gonna feel shitty, and this ain't going nowhere. Like, it's going nowhere.
Exactly.
So it really is, like you said, we think sometimes we want to say something. I have something to bring forward, that the speaker has all the power. Yeah. But the listener has so much power, because as soon as you make that person feel like they were heard, that you heard them, they're like, I feel understood. I feel nurtured. I feel empowered. And now they're ready to hear you. So, like you said, if you have the skills and the partner doesn't, you can start the communication more effectively with your listening, and the ball will get rolling.
Exactly.
Be a model, right? It's almost like you're almost like tricking them.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, it's a very genuine thing, if you want to say it that way, you know, because what you're really doing is validating the other person, and it just goes to show how, you know, a very skillful approach is kind of a win-win, right? Because at the end of the day, most likely you'll be able to say your piece, and the other person got heard too, and you're probably gonna solve the problem more effectively. So it's definitely a reason to kind of think about how to use these skills. So I wanted to just talk about, and again, Dr. Rizzo is going to share these skills at the end with those who are, I think, tuning in now. But I want to talk about what are the pieces. So when you're thinking about a speaker, you know, what does a speaker do? What's their role, right? So as a speaker, your role is to really communicate a main point. So what we really recommend is for people to speak in paragraphs, right? So don't try to convey a monologue, because at the end of the day, you want the other person to really understand what you're saying. And if it's too long, it's too much information, you know, they're not going to be able to pick it up, and they're going to miss important points. So definitely think about just a bite size, kind of like a sound bite, you know, think about 3 to 5 sentences, what you want to communicate, and work.
Okay, so that's key. I just want to highlight, like, I'm like a highlighter. I'm like the Cole's Notes version of things, okay? So like so if we're trying to communicate something, you said, think of like 3 to 5 points. Say that again, 3 to 5.
Well, I would say like 3 to 5
3 to 5 sentences max,
but really like on like one main point. So
5 even feels like I love to communicate and I'm very wordy, but even 5, when I hear 5, I'm like, it sounds like a lot, like, you know.
That sounds like a lot. Yeah. It's a generous range, but really you're thinking about bite-sized pieces, especially if it's a really emotional topic. You want to keep it short, because when a lot of emotion goes into it, people aren't able to process things as effectively. So keep your words and how long you're speaking to a minimum. I think one of the most important and most challenging pieces of the speaker role is to talk about your opinions and experiences subjectively instead of absolute truths. And this gets people into so much trouble and is challenging.
So what does that mean? You want us to say things subjectively instead of absolute truth. So let's start with what we're not supposed to say. What would be an absolute truth?
So don't talk about your own experience as if it were a fact in the world. Use it as what it is. It's your experience, and own your experience, and it's true for you, and no one can dispute that. But it's not true that it's a fact.
So give us an example. So don't say this, say this instead.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think like an easy example might be something like, you know, like let's say, for example, you texted your partner during the day because you had a bad day and you really wanted some emotional support. And, you know, they text you back like 8 hours later. It's like at the end of the workday and you finally get a text from them, and, you know, you finally hear back. And so, you know, you feel really frustrated, you're hurt, you're really looking for that support. But what you say to them is, you know, I can't believe you didn't respond to me for a whole day. What's the matter with you? You know, you're a terrible person.
My words were a little different in my head, but okay, terrible person, sure.
Yeah, right.
Rude, jerk. No. Okay.
Exactly. But you know, making comments.
We gotta keep it light, guys. We gotta keep it light, okay?
Could be kids on the other end. We don't know. But making statements about, for example, who your partner is as a person, instead of, which comes across as an absolute truth. For example, you're a jerk, you know, you're insensitive, you don't care about me, versus I was really hurt by not getting your text for a whole day. I was, you know, I really needed some support and I didn't get anything, and I was feeling really alone. I mean, just hearing those two, what's your reaction to how?
As soon as I hear the second one, like if someone's coming at me and they're like, "You're a terrible person. You didn't get back to me. You don't care about me." I'm like, "Whoa!" Like my defense shields are already up. Whereas like if you're like, "I just really needed some support today, and I just felt really bad, like not to get that from you in the moment that I needed it. I just felt, you know, I just really needed that support." Automatically, my heart feels like open, and I feel compassionate towards that person. Like, oh my gosh, I'm like compassionate towards their pain. You know what I mean? And I don't feel like I need to defend myself.
Exactly.
Whereas, like, let's just all have a reminder here. That person, number one, might not have seen the message. Number two, they might have just been busy with work. Like, we don't know what was going on, right? Like, you know how many times I get back to people, like, 2 days later? Like, whoops. Like, it's not, you're just, you never know. So don't jump the gun. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're going to talk in a second about when you're in the listener role, kind of your goal is really to understand where that person's coming from and put yourself in their shoes. So we'll talk more about that. But I think you described that beautifully, how, you know, you're much less defensive when that person owns their own experience, and they can be very vulnerable about it, right? And they can say, I was really hurt, or they can talk about things that were really challenging, but you're going to be much less defensive about it. So that's really why talking about your experience subjectively is so powerful.
Okay, got it.
And as part of that, you know, in this example, is to include your emotions or feelings about the situation, right? So as soon as maybe I said, I was really hurt, you know, I was really feeling lonely and I really needed someone, that's going to, again, soften the whole communication. Now, you're not going to say something that's not true, right? But that's going to, you know, you do risk being more vulnerable. And if the person doesn't respond well, you know, you might get a little hurt. But it also might, again, bring the other person's defenses down, because they're more likely to understand, oh, I see why you're so upset, because really, you know, you were so disappointed, and you really needed someone. So they're going to be more likely to understand where you're coming from if you can express your emotions about it.
Got it. Yeah, not blaming, but just expressing your own emotions about it.
Yeah, so using those I statements. So whenever you're kind of, you know, instead of saying, you know, you are such a, oh, no, wait, no, this makes me feel blank. You know, when you do this, it makes me feel, you know, fill in the blank, is a really easy way to change the way you frame your experience.
Yes, we're not really pointing the finger at them. We're more like just sharing our own experience, how we felt.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
great.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing, you know, is I guess the other important piece of this is just thinking about tact and timing. So really it's about, you know, when you decide to have these conversations, because timing matters, right? So imagine, for example, that you want to have an important conversation with your partner about the upcoming holidays and the in-laws visiting, and it's going to be really stressful, you know? And maybe this is like a tense topic for you. So as soon as your partner walks in the door and they've got one foot in the house, if you automatically say, hey, we need to have this conversation right now, how do you think that's going to go over?
Can I chime in there? Because I could tell you, as someone who, and I've worked on this for years, and especially over the last 2 years, and I learned so much over the last 4 years of my life especially, and I can tell you, as someone who used to be, as she talked about in the beginning, like the demand person of like, we got to talk about this now, like I used to be very stuck in that now. I've worked on that very much over the last few years, and I can tell you the biggest thing that I learned and that I live now, and it works so much better, and I honestly, before I was just like shooting myself in the foot because nothing was going the way I wanted it when I was like putting these demands that we have to have this conversation in my way and my time. When I'm giving the person their space and I'm feeling them out and I'm actually honoring that maybe now's not a good time for them to have this conversation and I'm respecting how they're feeling, when we do have the conversation goes a lot better. Like, you know what I mean? So I've learned and I'm practicing like that waiting and that respect of the other person. And now things are like, you know, the communication is going a lot better. So I can tell you, like, from my own experience, it can be tough in the beginning. I so get it. But as you work on your own internal stress processes and you remind yourself of that, like, it works out better. So just a little glimpse of hope for you there. Just take it from me.
Yeah, right. You've been there, right? You have firsthand experience of, and we've all been in that, I think, that situation where someone wants to talk to us at a time when we're not ready, right? It's like, I'm about to, you know, I'm gonna miss my bus if I sit and have this conversation with you, you know.
Well, now I have a child, right? You know, so I'm like, listen, like, I can't literally, and now what I say usually is like, well, I want to make sure that I can give you my full attention when we're having this conversation. And I say, you know, we deserve to have a proper conversation. And I really can't show up for like undivided attention right now.
Exactly. And the piece I will say that's really critical, which can get sometimes, this is where couples can get stuck, is when they never come back to the conversation. So you always
I always do.
To it.
And I usually give like a time frame. Like I'll say, I can't have this conversation right now.
Perfect.
Can we talk, you know, in 2 hours I'll be free. Can I call you back then?
Yeah. That's great. That's excellent. So that's just a piece that then you'll close the loop, right? Then you'll actually have the conversation and you both will be in a better place. And it kind of relinquishes,
like, if someone's in that state of like, I want to talk right now, it's funny when then the other person gets like that. And then they say like, I want to talk now, when you're like, I'll call you in 2 hours, and you actually have to call them back. Like, you can't just, because if you do that, you're just going to make things worse. They have to be able to trust that you're going to be true to your word. And you actually call them back and you give them a time. Hey, I'll call you in 2 hours. Their anxiety goes down. They're like, okay, she's going to call me in 2 hours. I know she will, because she always does.
Exactly.
And then they're more relaxed. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So you kind of put their, you know, maybe allow them to have their distress come down, right? Because you were communicating effectively, and they were able to hear what you said, and you follow through on your action, on what you said you were going to do. And therefore, like you said, they trust you now, and you can have that conversation in a better space.
So just before, because I think the next thing you're going to do, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Belus, is the next thing we're going to go through the speaker listener, right? Okay, so before we get there, because we're getting to the bread and butter now, guys. We're getting to the bread and butter. This is like the best tool. I would just want to Cole's note version, what we talked about so far, so that everyone can remember. So we talked about the 3 types of, you know, communication. If you're catching the replay, or if you're going on now, you have to go back and watch. So we talked about the 3 kinds of communication. We talked about I statements, not blaming the other person. So not saying, you know, you're a terrible person, you didn't call me back, but, you know, rather saying, you know, I feel unsupported when you say you're going to call me back and you don't. Like something more like that, owning your own experience. And then now we're talking about how if you are going to have a conversation, like respecting when someone else isn't ready to have the conversation or is just busy, and then just respecting that and coming back to it, but making sure that you set a time to come back to it and that you do come back to it. You don't just say, oh, we'll talk about this later, and then you don't talk about it. Nuh-uh.
That's not gonna work.
Yeah. Okay. So now the bread and butter. The bread and butter.
Well, the other piece though, before we go
Yeah.
on, just really quickly, along with timing, is tact.
Oh.
So it does matter how you say what you want to say.
Yeah.
Right. So we can think about, you know, communicating the same message, but in very different ways, right? So when we think about someone who has tact, I mean, what does tact mean to you? When someone's got good tact, what do they, how do they communicate?
Well, they're like, it's not aggressive. Yeah, it's more like
exactly.
they're saying, I almost want to say tasteful, like they're saying it tastefully. You know
Tasteful,
what I mean?
Tasteful, gentle.
Gentle, yeah.
Right.
It's not fighting words.
Exactly.
It's like someone who really just wants to communicate in a healthy and loving way. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And the reason why tact is so important, even though at the end of the day, we can think about an untasteful versus a tactful response to something or a form of communication, again, it's always about how is the listener going to hear this? Are they going to be more defensive or less defensive?
You know,
if they're going to be more defensive, that's probably the wrong style of communication.
You know what? Yeah, I just want to stop you there. So I don't know if anyone else watches this, but you know, on Will Smith's wife, Jada, she has her show called The Red Table, and she had Will on there one time. Yeah, it's called The Red Table. Okay, so YouTube it. And they were talking about that, and he's so great because he talks about how he grew up in a very not healthy environment at home, and he really didn't want that for his family when he had his family. And he talks about how when he's so, you know, if he's we're all humans, we all experience emotions. If he's really emotional and he just can't have a healthy conversation, he already has these lines in his head, like he'll say to his wife, you know, I can't be loving right now. I can't communicate in a healthy way right now. So instead of saying fighting words or you're this or that, he's just like, listen, I can't be loving right now. I need to step away from this and talk about this later. And it's helpful. Yeah, exactly. So that's, you know, expressing tact in the moment that you can't have that conversation, and it goes back to timing too, right? Now it's not a good time, but we'll come back and actually come back to it. And actually come back to it. Exactly. Got to close that loop. But yeah, so just think about your words, and, you know, sometimes for really emotional things, it might mean taking a break, reflecting on what you want to say. You know, it might sound silly, but actually writing it down. Thinking it through, and then coming back and then having something to rely on to help you communicate more effectively. And that's okay, especially when it's a difficult topic. You know, we need sometimes more, we can't just rely on our brains in the moment. You know, we can use pen and paper to help us get our ideas down before we actually kind of fully enter the conversation. Okay, so enough about the speaker. What about the listener? You know, what's their role? What do they do? What are the do's and don'ts of the speaker? I'm sorry, of the listener. So, I mean, when we think about a listener, you know, I guess what comes to mind for you? Well, actually, for me, what comes to mind is actually like being grounded and being like, you know, because if I'm in my head thinking about what I want to say, I can't listen. I can't really hear what you want to say. So, you know, there's this one quote of like, the problem, like, don't be listening to respond, listen to actually listen, right? So I need to actually have a clear mind and just be focusing on what you're saying.
Yeah, but you touched on this really key piece, which we see so often, which is when the person, your partner, for example, again, just the example, when your partner's talking to you and you disagree, so you are not listening anymore, right? You are generating your response. But like you just described beautifully, you can't listen and come up with your response all at the same time. So what's going to suffer? Your listening is going to suffer, right? Your understanding of where your partner is coming from is going to suffer. So
can I just before you, like, I just want to say too, like, something else. I mean, seriously, the last 4 years, you guys, you don't know how much I've been working on this. Like, another thing that's very helpful is to just kind of like remind myself and be like, okay, what's the point of having this interaction right now? Like, am I doing this because I want to bring more love to this interaction? And if it's not that I want to bring more love, then don't do it. Like, you know, there's no point in having this interaction right now, whether it's with someone at work, whether it's with a romantic partner, whether it's with anybody, a family member. If I don't want to bring more love and healing to this interaction, don't do it. And then if I need to step out and maybe come back to another time, do that. Like you got to go in with the mindset, because if we're going in to respond, we're not going in with bringing more love to the interaction. We're going in with like, I want to win. Well, it's not about I want to win. It's about I want to have a healthy relationship with this person. And it's not about winning.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think the other thing too is that, like with the example you just gave, is when you're going in with the mindset of, how am I going to respond? Your mindset is a speaker mindset. It's not a listener mindset. So check yourself. Am I really in the listener space, listener zone, or am I a listener, but I'm actually really have a speaker mindset? Because those two can't, you can only be one or the other in any given moment. And if you're not fully listening, you're actually not listening at all.
Oh, I love that. If you're not fully listening, I'm going to make a quote image of that. If you're not fully listening, you're not actually listening at all.
Yeah.
Note to self.
Exactly. And I think, but again, just to validate that this is really challenging. And I think, again, especially in our society, we've, again, very much been sold this narrative of, speaking is powerful, and it is. Again, I want to validate that point too, but that we have to speak, we have to kind of talk over each other, we have to get out what we want to say quickly and decisively, and that's not always, often is not the best way to actually go about long-term effective communication. So just pause, take a step back. You'll have your chance to say your piece, but just think about, what would it be like to really embrace being a listener. And again, like we talked about before, it feels so good when we're on the receiving end. We have a really good listener, and they validate us and they understand.
It's like a warm hug. Like, it's like so loving. It's like, oh, it's like, feels so good for someone who actually is listening to you. Yeah.
And sometimes it feels so good because it happens so rarely, truth be told. We all aren't that lucky to have really good listeners in our lives. So if you can be that for somebody else, especially for someone you care about, like your partner or a loved one, why not, take on that role?
It was funny because with one of my partners in the past, we would joke about it, but we used to say, like, we saw it on a TV, I don't even remember where we saw it. I think like a movie or something. And they had like a stick, and they'd be like, "Okay, it's your turn to talk." And the person talking, just so it was clear, like, I'm the talker right now. I have the stick. And then when they're done, then they would like pass the baton to the partner.
Exactly. I mean, that it sounds funny to say, but actually, like, for couples where
just starting,
or they get really activated on certain topics, that actually could be also kind of a way to bring a little bit of humor into an otherwise tense situation. So it's really not a bad idea, and it could really work for some people. Okay, but so you're the listener. So how, basically, your role is to really show that you've understood where the speaker is.
And I just want to say something. Sorry, now I'm doing bad communication. I'm cutting Dr. Belus off. But I just want to say, because I feel like it's important. So she's like, you really want to show the other person that you heard them. I just want to make a clear point, okay? If you didn't actually hear them, or you're not sure and you need clarification, don't pretend that you heard them. Actually say, I'm sorry, I need more clarification because I'm not really understanding what you're saying. Don't pretend like you heard them. Don't do it.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that the listener is going to do is they are going to kind of summarize, paraphrase, repeat back, what they heard, as a way to ensure that they understood. Because sometimes we think we understood. Oh yeah, I got it. This is what this is what she always says. She's but did you actually get it right? I don't know as the speaker whether you really understood me or you just think you understood me. So if you want to actually kind of fully embrace the listener role, it really doesn't hurt to say, okay, so it sounds like, maybe back to the text message example, it sounds like you were really upset because, you were really hoping for some support that day, and I know you really lean on me for that, and, and you felt disappointed that you didn't hear back from me. Oh, okay, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Or, no, actually, you missed this part of it, right? So if as the listener, if you miss something, then the speaker can know, hey, you missed an important piece. Here's what you didn't get. So that paraphrasing, summarizing at the end of what the speaker says is really important.
Because how much more of a problem is that? I'm sure we must have all had this experience, right? Of like, we walked away and it's like, oh, they got what I said. And then the person's like, yeah, I got what they said. And then like 2 months later, same thing comes up and you're like, what? And like, nobody was on the same page.
Yeah. Exactly. So this is like a check, right? It's like, here's what I heard. Oh, yeah. And then the speaker can say yay or nay, and they can clarify.
So what Dr. Belus is saying is like, after the speaker talks as the listener, after they're done talking, you want to reflect back what you understood that they said. So what I usually like to do when I'm talking with people is, so what I'm hearing is, actually do this with patients a lot when I'm doing it's called reflective listening or active listening. And I'll just say, so what I'm hearing is, and I'll repeat back what I feel like I'm saying. And I say, does that resonate? Or please clarify if I have anything wrong.
Yeah.
And then the other person can say, yeah, that's totally it. Or they can say, yeah, actually. And then they can, fill in the holes if there are any.
Exactly, right? So that's exactly the kind of dialogue that we want. And it really is a dialogue then, right? Because you know whether you're on the same page or not. But again, just to go back to the listener's role is to really to understand and to show you understand where the speaker is coming from. Just because you understand though doesn't mean you necessarily agree. And this is tricky for people to, sometimes they get stuck on it, but just because I can say, again, back to that text message example, okay, I can understand maybe why my partner like didn't get back to me all day when I needed him, for example. Doesn't mean I agree that he made the right choice. Maybe I would have done something different, but I can understand. I can put myself in his shoes and say, okay, given all the things that were going on, I get why you did that. So I want to just make that distinction really clear. It doesn't mean you agree. It just means you get it. You understand. Does that make sense? Because that's an important piece.
Yeah. So not that you would do what they, I feel like there's like some negative connotation around that though. Like, not that you would do what they did, but you understand. Like, I feel like maybe we need to go a little deeper with that.
Well, the point is that, you actually may have done what they did. That's totally possible, but you may not. Because often when you're having, when these skills really come up is when you disagree about something, right? Like, so even if you would have made a different choice, it doesn't mean that you can still understand why that person made the
decision they made. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone wants more clarification, just say so. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And these will also, again, these will be the tips.
We're going to give you a little extra gift there.
So hopefully that's helpful too. But so again, ways to show that you really get what the person is telling you is, we can think about our body language, right? Nodding, the way your body posture is, your tone of voice, leaning in, exactly. So those are all kind of ways to show that you're understanding and also that you're really present, that you really are listening. And then again, at the end, once you hear what the person says, you're summarizing, repeating back. And again, if you don't get something, that gap will become pretty clear pretty quickly. So, and then the person can just clarify, what their goal was. So the things not to do as a listener, all right, so you are not speaking other than just paraphrasing, summarizing. So you're not asking questions to further the discussion yet. When you're really listening, you're just asking questions to clarify. Okay, sorry, I didn't get what you said. Did you say this or that? Or not, oh, so tell me about blah, blah, blah. Like, you're not taking the conversation into a different direction.
So this is great. Okay, I love this. Because so what Dr. Belus is saying, when you are the listener, you're just listening to understand. And then if you ask a question, it's only to clarify your understanding of what they're saying. So for example, if someone is saying, their experience and how they feel, you're not going to be like, oh, well, that made you feel like this. Well, do you remember the time that blah, blah, blah?
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? You're just like, wait, so what I'm hearing is this. Is that correct? You're not like taking the conversation where you want it to go. I almost just want to say, just shut up and listen. And you're just listening to understand what they're saying so that you understand. Yeah.
Exactly. then again, you know, when we think about these skills are part of a larger dialogue, right? So you'll get your turn to speak and to have your voice heard, and that's really important too. It does, you know, we need it to be equal in terms of both people feeling heard and understood. So you'll definitely get your chance maybe to relate this incident back to another incident if that's relevant, you know. But in that moment, your goal is just to reflect back and not to steer the conversation. The other two just quick things is don't try to solve a problem if there is one. You know, we've all been in that situation where we just want to share, just maybe want to vent a little bit, and the person on the receiving end, you know, wants to problem solve with us. Oh, you had a bad day at work? Oh, here are all the things you could do differently, you know. And while it's coming from probably a good place of wanting to help, it might not be what that person is looking for. So again, don't jump to problem solving if that's not what the goal of the conversation is.
I used to get that all the time, and it was from a good place. Like, they were so sweet. Like, well, just tell me what to do. Like, just what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I don't want you to do anything. I'm just listen. Like, and I feel like sometimes that can, you know, if one person is like a doer or a fixer, like, just give me this, just tell me what to do. And it's like, I just want to vent.
Right. So sometimes, you know, what's helpful for people if they find themselves in this kind of not a conundrum, but, you know, in this situation often is just to check in with the person before you actually dive into the conversation and say, hey, I just want to share about my day. You know, I don't want to problem solve yet. So we can put our, you know, problem solving on pause for now. I just really want you to listen. So that way that person knows, okay, you don't need me to problem solve. At least I know. And even though I might have a tendency to want to problem solve, you know, but I can put it in a corner for now, or at least catch myself.
And if you're the venter, like if you're the one venting, it's kind of nice too, just say to that person, like, I really appreciate you just taking the time to just listen to me. Like, thank you so much for creating this safe space for me to you know, dump my feelings. Yeah,
exactly. So I think those are the main, you know, skills that are really important for both the speaker and listener.
So can you please, Dr. Belus, just in a very quick bullet point fashion, speaker, listener, give us the bullet points.
Yeah, so speaker is really about delivering one main point at a time. Keep your verbal communication to a paragraph at most, but really one main idea, and communicate everything subjectively. You're talking about your own experience. Think about when you're delivering your message and how you're delivering it. So that's tact and timing. And, you know, it's okay to include your emotional experience as well, because that's really helpful for the other person on the other end, the listener, to understand what your experience is. So that's the speaker. The listener, your goal is really about understanding 100%. It's about trying to understand where the speaker's coming from, trying to put yourself in his or her shoes. And so your goal is really, as best as possible, to just listen and, again, validate the person's experience. You're not problem solving. You're not sharing your own experience yet. You know, you're not expressing, again, your own viewpoint or anything. You're just really there to listen by bringing 100% focus on what that person is saying, reflecting back, and giving the speaker another chance to clarify if you've missed anything.
Beautiful.
How's that?
Lovely. Thank you. That was just it was just so lovely. Like, I
hope it was helpful.
I hope it was helpful for you guys too. For me, it was great. I'm just like, this was a great review.
It doesn't hurt, right? So, because we all, you know, communication is something we can all continue to think about and you know, do better at, and just to always reflect on, you know, what are your sticking points? What are your challenge moments, right? It could be certain people, certain times of day, certain topics. So it's good to be aware of that. And then during those moments, maybe take a step back first, and you can do a little bit of preparation in thinking about these skills and how they might apply.
Yeah, that's great. And I think something to highlight, as someone who's like worked on this in her own personal life for the last, you know, 4 years especially, it's like, it's just like any self-care, or any, sorry, the desk just got shaky. Any self-care or any sort of like stress management thing, like, we're all humans. We never, like, I always say to people, like, well, if you change the oil in your car, do you only need to change it once? Do you ever stop driving? Do you ever not change the oil? It's like, we're human beings. We constantly have interactions. Does that mean we learned it once, we did it once, and now we're good?
Right.
Like, it's like a constant ebb and flow and learning and reminding. So have that patience with yourself, but, you know, also be diligent enough to implement the things that you learn. And like I said, if you're catching, so if you were on live, please say hi. There were some viewers who hopped on and off. I saw, I don't know who they were. I saw the numbers, and if you don't say hi, I can't send you your free gift. If you're catching the replay, I want you to hashtag replay in the comments. If you have a friend who you think might benefit from hearing this, you know, tag them in the comments, share this video with them. And Dr. Belus, how can people find you, or is there a like what is your contact that you can share? What's something you can share?
Yeah, so I can send my email to you. Maybe you can post it on under the video. So
Do you want to say it, what it is now, if you don't mind?
Yeah, definitely. It is, so my work email is jbelus@umd. I work at the University of Maryland, so umd.edu. So you can definitely contact me there if any of this resonates with you. And again, I do full-time research, but obviously I have the clinical background and expertise. So happy to discuss more.
Yeah, so Dr. Belus gave us a free gift that I can share with you as long as you say hi in the comments or hashtag replay so that I can see the viewers, and I will private message you the free gift. So Dr. Belus, thank you so much for sharing. My heart is like so grateful that you shared your wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
And you were so great at just kind of, you know, sharing about your own experiences, and I'm sure that's helpful for people to hear too, you know, how some of these skills apply. So, you know, thank you for being so vulnerable and open.
Thank you. Yeah, hashtag human experience, right?
Exactly.
Okay, everyone. Well, have a good night, Dr. Belus. You all have a good night. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Dr. Jennifer Belus, PhD in clinical psychology, specializing in couples therapy. My name is Dr. Nadia Rizzo, naturopathic doctor. And of course, this is Health Made Simple.